Oh guys, honestly, I don't even know where to start today's video. I guess the best way is to show you this hilarious clip first. Alright everyone, hello! Today we're going to talk about one of the most disappointing moments in recent Russian game development. A game called PIONER. I couldn't ignore this game's release because, whether we like it or not, it is an event. Russian developers don't release games very often, so when they do, expectations are naturally higher. So I bought the game, I played it, and I was genuinely shocked. Shocked by how embarrassingly bad it is. So in this video, I have one main goal: to do everything possible to make sure none of you ever buys this game. Although, to be fair, the developers themselves already did a pretty good job at that. How? By cutting off Russian and Belarusian players entirely. A few weeks before release, the developers from GFAGAMES announced that the game would not be sold on Steam in Russia and Belarus. The only official way for Russian players to buy and play the game was through a brand new launcher called Rostelecom Games. Think of it as a local Steam, a competitor to VK Play. And let me guess the reasoning. Russians can't top up Steam anymore, so this is more convenient. Sounds reasonable, until you realize that in the same launcher you can still top up Steam and buy Steam keys without any issues. But apparently that's considered foreign, while this is domestic. Let's be honest, I'm only interested in one thing here. How much money Rostelecom paid the PIONER developers? Judging by how aggressively both the game and the launcher were promoted by streamers and YouTubers recently, I'm fairly sure the amount was significant. Here's the problem. I can't really tell you much about the launcher itself because I couldn't even register in it. And no, I'm not from Belarus, where SIM cards are blocked from registration, which is ironic considering the game was removed from Steam for Belarusian players, yet they also can't register in Rostelecom games because registration requires a Russian SIM card. But I do have a Russian passport, I do have a Russian phone number, and I still couldn't log in. Why? Because the launcher simply doesn't work. I spent over 2 hours trying to sign in. The process is extremely simple. Enter your phone number and solve a CAPTCHA, except every attempt resets the CAPTCHA. After about 30 tries, it just throws an error. So yes, I ended up buying the game on Steam, which honestly was the better option. At least Steam offers refunds. Rostelecom Games does not, according to their support, and I quote, "We do not refund money for digital goods." I already knew Rostelecom had a questionable reputation, but this feels like a topic for an entirely separate video. Honestly, I still don't understand why they did this. Did they seriously expect everyone to rush and download Rostelecom Games just to buy this? Yes, gaming in Russia is complicated right now. You can't easily buy games directly, and some online games barely work anymore. For example, Fortnite. It often can't even find a match and just throws a connection error. And yes, thanks to government internet restrictions, some critical servers were blocked. So if you want to play Fortnite properly, you now need various tools to bypass those blocks, VPNs, and similar solutions. But that's a separate topic. Let's start from the beginning. The game is an online MMORPG first-person shooter. As a player, you're supposed to loot, go on raids with a party, complete story quests, all of that in a very familiar setting. The story takes place in an alternative Soviet-era reality. There's a remote island where some unknown experiments went horribly wrong, causing a massive catastrophe. The world turned into a living nightmare. Mutants roam everywhere, and the remaining humans are divided into factions that the player must interact with to complete quests and earn rewards. Along the way, you encounter various anomalies, which you detect by throwing these small metal objects, something almost everyone remembers finding as a kid. To be honest, I never fully understood what those things are supposed to be. In short, the game world is dangerous and hostile, and your main objective is to explore it and become one of the best pioneers in this exclusion zone. Now let's all say it together. What does this game remind you of exactly? It's very clearly inspired by Stalker 2. Here's an important bit of context. In Russia, the developers of Stalker 2 were officially labeled as extremists and terrorists. Because of that, many Russian gamers, especially streamers and YouTubers, are afraid to play the game, make videos about it, or stream it on Twitch. There's even a theory that this situation conveniently helps PIONER avoid direct comparisons with Stalker 2. Despite the obvious similarities, the developers clearly wanted to create their own exclusion zone with their own lore. They understood that a familiar atmosphere, a Russian setting mixed with post-apocalypse, is something players genuinely enjoy, even if the game itself isn't perfect. But here's the problem. If you compare PIONER to Stalker 2, there's almost nothing in PIONER that actually feels Russian. Aside from a carpet on the wall, there's nothing that tells a Russian player, yes, this game is about Russia. Ironically, Stalker 2 feels far more authentic in that regard. Deserts? Canyons? Where exactly in Russia are you supposed to find landscapes like that? The atmosphere and level design don't feel post-Soviet at all. The locations are either massive empty spaces with small decorative buildings you can't even explore, they're just there to fill space, or repetitive bunkers clearly made using a copy-paste approach. I also have serious issues with the visuals. First of all, what exactly did you do to this game that it freezes every few minutes? The FPS is all over the place, and I wouldn't say the game actually looks good. In the prologue, everything looks okay, more or less. But once you step into the open world, visual noise appears, textures load right in front of your eyes, and the whole image becomes blurry and muddy. And this is on maximum settings, which, by the way, I can't even change. The graphics settings simply don't work. If my PC were weaker, I wouldn't be able to lower the settings at all. The game is broken from top to bottom. Now let's remember what kind of game this is. This is an online MMORPG shooter, and the key word here is online. The entire idea is interaction with other players, doing quests together, forming parties, progressing through the game, and that core mechanic simply doesn't work because the server side is also broken. Out of almost 2 hours of gameplay, I spent about 1 full hour staring at loading screens and reconnecting. You finish the prologue, where you defend a church from monsters, and then you're supposed to enter the online world. Except during the loading and server connection, everything freezes. I waited around 15 minutes for the connection, the game crashed. And when I logged back in, I was thrown back to the very beginning of the prologue. And this happens constantly. Every time you switch locations or try to match with other players, you're looking at a connection screen for anywhere from 2 to 30 minutes, if not longer. And there's about a 70% chance the game will either crash or fail to find you a party at all. You might think this happens because the servers are overloaded with players, right? Peak online at launch, around 900 players. That should tell you everything about the server infrastructure. My Minecraft server 10 years ago handled more players than this game. A game reportedly financed by Tencent, with developers claiming in interviews that they spent an 8-digit budget on it. And honestly, I think that number is probably understated, considering how aggressive the marketing has been lately. I genuinely don't understand who thought it was a good idea to make an online MMO shooter built entirely around co-op and player interaction, when you don't actually have stable online infrastructure. And if the servers can't handle even this, what happens in a month, or in 2 or 3 months? The answer is obvious. The game will shut down. It's heading straight toward the Concord scenario. But the problems don't end with the servers. The gameplay itself is a disaster. Between quests, you often have to run across completely empty fields for 15 minutes straight. I'm not exaggerating. You pick up a quest to clear a bunker, and before anything interesting happens, you just run. Sometimes mutants attack you, or you might find a bandit camp guarding resources, and you can fight them. Or you can simply step 5 meters outside the quest zone and the enemies disappear. You loot the area without firing a single shot. The quests themselves are as generic as it gets. Go there. do this, bring that back. Endless NPC dialogue that says absolutely nothing. And the core gameplay, shooting, is just boring. There's no real impact unless you land a headshot. Enemies feel like bullet sponges. And remember, this is an online game. Hit registration is inconsistent. You can empty an entire magazine and the enemy won't die, or they'll drop a second later. Completely random. And the enemies themselves are brain dead. They pose no real threat. Just look at this. What even is this? Why would you show this to players? Why embarrass your own game industry like this? Honestly, I think this game should be pulled from Steam in all regions. People shouldn't be shown this. I'm sorry, but even Smoother was more entertaining. Yes, it was terrible, but at least it was funny. It produced memes. PIONER, no one will care about it tomorrow. Bloggers will post videos, they'll get labeled as haters for criticizing a domestic product, and that's it. End of story. Several years of development, millions spent, all for nothing. I want you to clearly understand one thing. This game is not worth a single cent. Maybe, if the developers had made it a purely single-player, linear, story-driven game, it could have worked. But in its current state, with the core mechanics completely broken, I see absolutely no reason to spend your time on it. If I weren't making this video, I would never have played this game in the first place. That's it for today. Subscribe, leave a like, and see you next time.